My name is Daniel Holt. 23 years behind the wheel, mostly long-haul freight from New Mexico to California. I've driven through monsoon storms, black ice nights, and dust devils big enough to flip empty trailers. I thought I'd seen every strange thing a highway could throw at a man. But nothing prepared me for what happened on Route 66. On the stretch drivers whisper about as the Phantom Mile. It was a little after 12:40 a.m. I was hauling a refrigerated load of produce westbound, trying to stay ahead of a tightening delivery window. Fog isn't common in that region, not the thick kind anyway. But that night it rolled in like a living thing, dense, quiet, and too heavy for the warm air around it. Within minutes, visibility dropped so low I could barely see my own hood ornament. My high beams just bounced off the white curtain, making the world shrink down to a tunnel of swirling gray. First, it felt normal. Weather happens. Roads get weird. But then the first shape appeared. A figure stood near the shoulder, just a silhouette at the edge of my lights. Looked like someone wearing an old road worker's vest, maybe waving or maybe just standing there. I leaned forward, squinting, easing off the throttle. And just as my foot lifted from the pedal, it disappeared. Not walked away, not faded. One blink, gone. I muttered something to myself, chalking it up to fatigue and fog refraction. When you've driven as long as I have, your brain sometimes superimposes shapes into the mist. But then it happened again, and again. Each time, the shape stood a little closer to the roadway, angled a bit more toward my truck. The third one, its head seemed tilted, like it was staring up at me. By the fifth silhouette, my arms were covered in goosebumps. The cab felt colder, even though I had the heater running low. It was a kind of cold that didn't belong to temperature. It was the cold of someone breathing down your neck. Still, I pushed on. I kept scanning my mirrors. I don't know why. Habit, maybe. Fear, definitely. But every time I glanced at the side mirror, I saw nothing but fog, like the world had been erased beyond a few feet of glass. The CB was quiet, too quiet. No truckers, no chatter. Not even Channel 19 with the usual cussing and route complaints. Just a low hum of static. About 20 minutes in, I saw lights ahead. A way station, one I'd passed 100 times. Out there, in the fog, its lamps glowed dim and sickly yellow, like they were struggling to stay lit. I figured maybe someone could tell me if there were detours ahead or if the fog had caused a pileup. Anything would be better than driving blind through that silent soup. As I pulled onto the lot, my headlights washed over empty asphalt. There were no trucks, no workers, no open sign, just darkness and flickering lamps. I idled near the booth, rolled the window halfway down. The air that entered wasn't just cold, it was wrong. It smelled like a mix of ozone and wet concrete, the kind of smell you get right before a lightning strike. And suddenly, the fog around the way station stopped swirling. It just hung there in sheets, unmoving, like the world was holding its breath. Then the CB crackled. A burst of static, sharp enough to sting my ears. I grabbed the mic, tapped it. Breaker 19. Anyone out here tonight? Visibility's rough. For 3 seconds, nothing. Then soft, close, almost whispered. Daniel. Just my name. Not the voice of a cop. Not a dispatcher. Not a trucker. A whisper that sounded like someone sitting behind me in the sleeper. My breath froze. I turned my head slowly toward the back of the cab, but the sleeper was pitch black. I flicked the dome light. Nothing. Just my duffel bag, the blanket, the narrow bed. I switched the CB off. Completely off. But the whisper came again. Same voice. Same breathy tone. Right inside the cab. My name. I put the truck in gear so fast I nearly popped the clutch. As I rolled away from the way station, the fog seemed to close around me again. Thicker, heavier, swallowing the building, the lights, the world behind me. I don't remember accelerating, but the needle climbed past 45, then 50. My palms were slick on the steering wheel. Then something even stranger happened. The road stretched. Not metaphorically. I mean, the asphalt literally looked like it was extending ahead of me. Past mile marker 213, which I knew well, came another marker 213. Same dents, same angle, same graffiti, Gina 89. I passed it twice, then 3 times. Every time I glanced at the odometer, it barely moved. Felt like I was driving in place. The steering wheel vibrated under my hands. Not with engine chatter, but with something deeper, like the truck was passing through pockets of air that weren't fully there. The fog thickened to the point where it felt solid, like driving through wet wool. The cold intensified. My fingertips stung. The windshield frosted at the edges, even though the outside temp was reading 63 degrees. Then came the sound. A diesel engine. Deep, slow, too close. It wasn't in front of me, and it wasn't behind me. It was beside me. I instinctively jerked the wheel left, expecting a truck to be merging into my lane. Only there was nothing but fog. No lights, no silhouette, just the sound of an engine that shouldn't have existed. And with the engine came a smell. Burnt rubber, and something metallic, almost like hot iron. Then, through the fog, faint but unmistakable, I saw taillights. Old ones. Round and dim, the kind you'd find on trucks from the 60s. They floated ahead of me, flickering like candles behind dirty glass. I tried slowing down. They slowed with me. I sped up. They kept their distance. Then, one by one, they blinked out. Not faded, not turned, just vanished. That's when I realized I wasn't on Route 66 anymore. The road markings were wrong. Too narrow, too faded. The reflectors were spaced like highways from decades ago. The asphalt looked cracked and aged in ways the real route hadn't been in years. Felt like I was driving through a memory, or someone else's last known place. The CB still turned off, hissed again. And the voice whispered, "You weren't supposed to see this." My chest tightened so hard I thought I was having a heart attack. I gripped the wheel with both hands, shut my eyes for half a second, and floored the accelerator. I didn't care where I ended up. Forward was better than whatever was creeping up behind me. The truck roared. The fog thinned. And suddenly, I broke through. Just like that. 1 second the world was white and dead. The next I was barreling down a clear stretch of modern Route 66. The sky above was starry. The road markers correct. The way station nowhere in sight. I pulled over and sat there for a long time. Engine idling. Heart pounding in my throat. My mirrors were clear. The CB was quiet. The world felt real again. I delivered the load. I never told dispatch what happened, but I've avoided that stretch ever since. And sometimes when the CB cuts out for a second, when the static swells, when the cabin fills with that faint smell of wet concrete and ozone, I swear I hear that whisper again. My name, like something out there is still tracking my miles. My name is Luke Ramirez. I've been running freight for nearly 20 years, mostly cross-country hauls through the Midwest and the South. I've seen weather eat a highway, had tires blow out in the dead of night, and crawled through ice storms where the road disappeared beneath me. But what I saw near exit 47, I can't rationalize no matter how hard I try. It was past 2 a.m. I was hauling a load of auto parts from Chicago to Atlanta, eastbound on an interstate that cuts through what drivers call the nowhere stretch. Concrete barriers on either side, nothing but scrub and telephone poles for miles. My rig was a 2018 Kenworth T680, tires warm and humming the road, cab quiet except for the low rumble of the engine and the occasional creak from the trailer. The CB had been dead for over an hour. Channel 19 was silent. Not a single rig in sight. That's not unusual at this hour, but it always sets your nerves on edge. Hours of isolation make small things seem bigger. That's when I saw it. A truck, parked under a street lamp at exit 47. Not a trailer in sight, just the cab. The light above flickered sporadically, casting half shadows across the asphalt. The headlights were off, but I could feel the heat. The kind of heat that rolls out in waves when a diesel's been running too long, pressing against your face through the mirror glass. I slowed down, just slightly, glancing at it through my passenger side mirror. There was someone in the driver's seat, pale, motionless, staring straight at me, not blinking, not moving, just watching. For a second, I thought it was another trucker resting. Maybe someone pulled over to nap. But something about the way that face sat in the cab, it wasn't human in the usual sense. Too still, too wrong. When I looked back to the road ahead and checked my mirrors again, it was gone. Vanished. Not turned down a ramp, not backed into a lot. Nothing. Empty asphalt under a flickering light. My pulse spiked. I told myself it was a trick of the fog, or maybe my tired eyes playing games. I eased back onto cruise control, but the hair on the back of my neck refused to settle. That's when I started noticing it. Shadows along the road, fleeting glimpses in my mirrors. Each time I glanced back, the same truck appeared behind me, always under the same flickering light, yet no matter how fast I drove, it never closed the distance. The CB hissed. Static, low at first, then louder. I keyed the mic. Breaker 19. Anyone? Anyone out there? The reply was faint, crackling, but unmistakably a whisper. Luke! I froze. My hands gripped the wheel harder. Who's that? I asked, voice tight, almost cracking. Nothing but static after that. I told myself it was interference, maybe a CB echo. But the name, that was my name. The road seemed to stretch unnaturally. Mile markers repeated. Concrete barriers looked the same. I passed a bridge I knew well, but the graffiti on the pillars had changed. It was older, faded, as if I were looking at the interstate decades ago. The truck stayed behind me, always at the edge of the fog, headlights off, heat radiating, engine humming low like it was alive. Sometimes, I swore I could hear the faint scent of burnt rubber, diesel, metallic oil. Smells that shouldn't reach a moving vehicle from a stationary rig miles behind. At one point, I passed a rest area. Empty. Lights out. The sign read, Exit 48. Closed. But my GPS told me I was still in the same stretch. I checked the mirrors again. That truck, closer. But still not catching me. I tried rationalizing it. Maybe it was a hallucination. Long-haul fatigue can do strange things. Maybe someone was pulling a prank. Maybe it was a phantom of a past accident. Trucker folklore always says the interstate holds memories, and some drivers never leave. I pulled into a diner at exit 50, the first sign of civilization in miles. Neon buzzed, flickering. I slid the truck into a parking space, shut down the engine, and stepped out. The night was quiet, except for my heartbeat in my ears. Inside, a waitress poured coffee, her eyes flicking toward the lot. I asked about the stretch around exit 47. She leaned in, voice low, almost conspiratorial. Truckers disappear there, she whispered. Some never come back. People say they see rigs like yours, parked under that old lamp. Engine running, driver staring. And then, she gestured vaguely, a shiver running through her shoulders. Gone. Just gone. My stomach turned. Every logical explanation I had was evaporating under that fluorescent diner light. I forced a smile and took my coffee, trying not to let her see the way my hands shook. Back in the cab, I checked the mirrors one last time before heading out. Nothing. The stretch ahead was empty, the night quiet. I drove on, but I couldn't shake the memory. That pale face, the heat radiating from the idle engine, the way it followed me without ever moving closer. Days later, I told another driver about it on the CB. He laughed nervously and muttered, Ghost rig at exit 47. Yeah, that's been around longer than any of us. Don't stop for it. Don't even look. I never did. But every time I approach that interstate, my stomach tightens. Every flicker of a street lamp makes me glance in the mirror. And sometimes, when the CB goes dead, and the highway is empty, I swear I can feel that heat behind me. That truck isn't out there to catch you. It's just watching. And I still feel it sometimes, in the quiet miles between towns. Always at the edge of vision, just under the fog line. Waiting. I survived that night. My load was delivered on time. But part of me never left that highway. Part of me is still driving through the mist, with that pale-eyed driver somewhere behind me. Watching, always watching. My name is Marcus Lane. I've been a trucker for over 18 years, mostly long hauls through the Midwest, often through back roads and stretches of highway that few drivers touch after sunset. I've dealt with black ice, sudden sandstorms, and the occasional drunk driver swerving across lanes at 2 in the morning. I thought I'd seen it all. Until that night. I was driving a 2016 Peterbilt 579, eastbound on a rural backroad connecting I-70 to a minor freight corridor. The moon was thin, hanging like a sliver in the sky, and the road stretched straight ahead with nothing but scrubland and telephone poles on either side. The CB had been quiet for hours, no chatter, no warnings, nothing. Just the low hum of the diesel engine and the occasional wind whistling through the cab. I spotted the way station about 20 minutes past midnight. A small structure, lights dim, like it hadn't been maintained in years. I'd never been on this back road before, so I figured I'd stop, check my logs, make sure the load was secure. As I rolled into the lot, the truck tires crunching over loose gravel, something felt off. The air smelled metallic, cold, like ozone after a lightning strike, though the sky was clear. My headlights caught the faint gleam of the office windows, but inside, it was empty. Not a person, not a uniform, not a trace of life. Papers on the counter rustled slightly, as if nudged by an invisible hand. I grabbed the CB. Breaker 19, anyone here? The static crackled for a moment, then a voice, soft, calm, but insistent, called out my name. Marcus. Marcus Lane. I froze. I knew that voice, or at least I thought I did. Dispatcher Doyle had retired 5 years ago. I haven't talked to him in years. But there it was on my CB, telling me to pull forward, to follow certain backroads I'd never driven. My rational mind screamed, this isn't real, but the instinct to obey trucks and dispatchers drilled into me. I followed the directions exactly. Turn right at the second gravel marker, then left past the rusted water tower. The road seemed familiar, yet entirely impossible. Mile markers repeated. Telephone poles leaned at odd angles. The asphalt sometimes ended abruptly, then continued as if nothing had happened. I glanced at the mirrors. The lot where the way station had been was gone. Nothing but empty dirt and weeds. No building, no lights, no signs. I passed small fields, barns, and abandoned sheds. Each time I thought I'd recognize a landmark, it shifted. Sometimes a barn would appear in my rearview, then vanish in the next blink. I smelled rain on sand, wet concrete, diesel, and something faintly burnt. It made the hair on my arms rise. The CB crackled again. Marcus, keep going. Almost there. The words were clear. No distortion, no static this time. Just a calm, measured voice guiding me. The feeling in the cab shifted. The steering wheel vibrated slightly, though I was on smooth asphalt. The vibration felt alive, like the road itself was pushing the truck along, not the tires. Goosebumps ran under the fluorescent dashboard lights, cold and prickling. I tried to rationalize it. You're tired. You've driven too long. Dispatcher Doyle recorded messages, maybe pre-programmed. But the roads themselves defied logic. GPS showed the route ending in empty fields. Every map I checked afterward had no roads connecting the points I'd driven. Then I saw it. A small bridge over a creek I didn't recognize. The planks were worn, slick from an unseen rain. I slowed, but as I passed, I glimpsed my mirrors. The way station office, bright now, almost glowing, stood under a flickering street lamp at the other side of the bridge. Papers stacked neatly on the counter, the door slightly ajar. Yet when I turned my head, it vanished. Empty lot again. Time felt wrong. The sun should have risen by now, but it was still dark. The CB whispered again, this time directing me onto a narrow gravel road. I obeyed, more out of habit than trust. Each mile stretched longer than the last. The road twisted like a ribbon, yet the truck handled it smoothly. The air inside the cab was thick, metallic, tinged with diesel and wet earth. I passed a patch of trees that shouldn't have been there according to my maps. Shadows moved between the trunks. Not animals, not people, just dark shapes, lingering at the edge of vision. Each time I glanced into the mirrors, the lot behind me, the way station, reappeared briefly, glowing under that same flickering light, papers rustling on the counter as though awaiting my return. I reached a clearing. The CB was silent now, the vibration gone. The road ahead merged back onto a familiar state highway. I checked the mirrors one last time. The lot was gone. No way station, no lamp, no papers. Nothing. Just an abandoned patch of gravel, cracked asphalt, and weeds. I parked at a diner down the road. The waitress glanced at me knowingly. "You took that back road?" she whispered. "Most drivers don't come back the same. Some never come back at all." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what she meant. The stretch where that way station had appeared, it wasn't supposed to exist. Yet it had, for me, for an hour or maybe longer. I followed instructions I'd never heard before, drove roads that aren't on any map, smelled things that shouldn't have been there, and felt steering vibrations that made the world itself seem alive. I never spoke of it to my company. They'd think I'd lost it, or worse, blamed it on fatigue. But I still remember the way the papers rustled without wind, the metallic cold that filled the cab, the calm whisper of a dispatcher who hadn't been alive for years. And I still wonder, did I really drive through that place? Or did the way station call to me, and I simply followed? The memory of that silent lot haunts me every time I take a back road. Every time I see a flickering light through the fog, I glance in the mirror, half expecting to see papers rustling on a counter that shouldn't exist. I survived. The truck made it to the delivery. But part of me, maybe the part that still grips the wheel when the night is long and the road is empty, never left that silent way station behind. My name is Carl Jenkins. I've been hauling freight for nearly 2 decades, mostly long hauls across the American Southwest. The Mojave has always been my favorite stretch. Desolate, quiet, and straight as an arrow. You get to hear the diesel, your own thoughts, and nothing else. Or at least that's what I thought. I was driving a 2017 Freightliner Cascadia, eastbound, hauling machinery parts from Los Angeles to Phoenix. It was past midnight, and the desert stretched endlessly under a muted sky. Stars above were pale, distant, and too still. The cab was quiet except for the low hum of the engine and the slight rattle of the trailer. CB Channel 19 was dead. No chatter. Just the isolation that comes from hundreds of miles with nothing but asphalt and desert sand. I first noticed it around mile marker 132. A pair of headlights appeared behind me. Bright, steady, almost too close for comfort. Yet every time I glanced back, there was nothing there. No vehicle, no glow, just black road stretching behind me, empty and silent. At first, I told myself it was a trick of the eyes. Fatigue maybe. Long hours can make the brain impose shapes in the darkness. But then, the lights mirrored my every movement. I slowed, and the glow slowed. I accelerated, and it crept closer. Not in a natural way, more like it was attached to my truck, following me with intent. I tried shaking it off, flipped the CB to channel 9, called out for anyone in the area. Nothing. Static hissed faintly, but no voice answered. The wind outside was still, yet the cab suddenly grew colder. My hands, which had been steady on the wheel, started tingling. Goosebumps spread across my arms under the fluorescent dash lights. The highway stretched like it had no end. Shadows along the roadside seemed to shift as I passed. Though I knew there were no buildings, no trees, nothing but sand and rock. The headlights stayed close, unwavering, even when I took the long curves through the canyons. I rationalized it as best I could. Maybe another truck was driving parallel, hidden by dips in the road. Maybe it was a hallucination from dehydration or fatigue. But every mile marker repeated. 132, 132 again. The desert looked the same, over and over, as if I were trapped in a loop. By 3:30 a.m., I couldn't stand it anymore. I pulled off at a small turnout. Headlights vanished the moment I hit the gravel. My heart was pounding, and the cab smelled of burnt rubber, diesel, and that faint, metallic desert ozone you notice right before a sandstorm. But there wasn't a storm. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped out, scanning the asphalt. My tires left deep impressions in the loose gravel, but next to them, another set. Deep, parallel marks leading off the road. into the sand, into nothing. The tracks didn't curve. They didn't fade gradually. They simply ended, as if the vehicle had lifted off the earth. I shined the beam across the desert, scanning the horizon. Nothing. No headlights. No shape. Just sand, rock, and silence. My chest tightened. My mind raced. The rational explanations were failing me. Back in the cab, I tried to restart the engine, convinced that driving faster would put distance between me and whatever it was. But the minute I pulled back onto the highway, I felt it again. The same cold unease, the vibration in the steering wheel, faint but persistent, like the world itself was bending around the truck. I checked the mirrors. Empty road. Yet somehow I could feel it behind me. Watching, mirroring, waiting. Sunrise came slowly, pink and hazy over the desert horizon. I drove in silence, unable to shake the memory of those headlights, the deep tire marks that led nowhere, and the sensation that something had been attached to me the entire stretch. It wasn't chasing me. Not exactly. It was shadowing me, staying just out of reach, testing me, or warning me. By the time I reached Barstow, I stopped at a diner to clear my head. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, poured me coffee and didn't look away. "Mojave stretch at night," she said softly. "Some truckers say they see lights behind them, even when the road's empty. Not everyone makes it past." I nodded, sipping the bitter coffee, feeling the desert sun start to burn off the chill that had seeped into my bones. She didn't need to explain. I knew. I delivered the load without incident, but the memory hasn't left me. Sometimes when I drive long stretches alone and the CB cuts out for a moment, I swear I feel that vibration in the wheel. I see the headlights in the rearview mirror, just at the edge of vision. Always following, always close, never catching up, but never letting go. The desert keeps its secrets, and I learned that night. Some miles aren't measured in asphalt, distance, or hours. They're measured in presence. You can't outrun it. You can only drive and hope that dawn comes soon enough to break the spell. I survived. My rig made it to Phoenix, but part of me is still out there, driving that empty highway with those headlights a constant shadow at my back. Waiting, watching, and every time I cross the Mojave after dark, I glance at the mirrors. Always. My name is Tony Ramirez. I've been behind the wheel of a Kenworth W900 for nearly 20 years, mostly long-haul runs across the Rockies and the Great Plains. I've seen dust storms, black ice, and desert nights so silent they make your own heartbeat sound loud. But nothing prepared me for what I saw that night at a lonely truck stop somewhere in Wyoming. It was around 1:15 a.m., the kind of hour where your mind is half asleep, and the highway feels like it stretches endlessly, the cab vibrating under you like a living thing. I'd been running a refrigerated load from Salt Lake City to Cheyenne, trying to make up time after a delayed departure. The road had been straight and empty for miles, the wind howling faintly through the cab vents, though the windows were closed. CB Channel 19 had been quiet for over an hour, except for the occasional static hiss that made my neck hairs stand on end. I saw the truck stop as a faint glow ahead, a single neon sign flickering weakly against the dark horizon. The parking lot was empty except for a couple of rigs idling near the pumps. I pulled in, tired, needing a break and a hot cup of coffee. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed softly. The place smelled faintly of oil, diesel, and old carpet. That's when I saw it. A mannequin sitting in the corner dressed like a trucker. Denim overalls, a flannel shirt, boots. It was slumped in a rocking chair, motionless, head tilted slightly downward, hands folded in its lap. At first, I didn't think much of it. Some kind of joke, maybe, for truckers passing through. I washed my hands and used the restroom. The echo of water in the tiled floor sounded louder than normal, and the faint hum of the fluorescent lights made my skin crawl. When I returned to the main room, my stomach sank. The mannequin had moved, not drastically, but closer to the door, just enough that its gaze seemed to follow the entrance. I told myself it was my imagination, maybe a trick of the angle, a shadow shifting, but my gut told me otherwise. I paid for a coffee in a shaky voice, my hands still tingling with goosebumps. I didn't linger. I needed to get back on the road. The lot was darker than before, though I could see my rig easily. Engines of other trucks hummed quietly in the distance. I slid into my seat, started the truck, and glanced at the mirrors. And that's when the hair on my neck stood straight up. Every truck in the lot, maybe a dozen, was empty. No drivers. Engines idling. Lights on. Waiting. I shifted into gear slowly. The feeling in the cab was different now. The air smelled metallic like cold iron. My knuckles whitened on the wheel as the diesel's hum felt almost alive, vibrating through my chest. I looked in the mirrors again. For a split second, I could swear I saw something moving among the rigs. A dark shape keeping pace, silent footsteps echoing faintly on the asphalt. I floored it. The tires hissed over gravel. The engine roared. But still, I felt it behind me. Footsteps. Soft, rhythmic, in time with my speed. I glanced into the side mirror. Nothing. But the sensation persisted. Close enough that I imagined it brushing against the trailer's fenders. The highway stretched ahead, empty. The lot faded behind me, but the unease didn't. My stomach churned as the memory of that rocking chair returned. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a maintenance worker, maybe a trick of the lot's shadows, but every instinct in my body screamed otherwise. Wind howled faintly through the cab vents, though the windows remained closed. The smell of burnt rubber and diesel thickened, almost choking me. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel, feeling the subtle vibrations that didn't match the road. Something was attached to me, watching, waiting. I passed the first mile marker, then the second. Everything seemed normal. The highway, the asphalt, the signs, but the memory of those empty trucks, engines idling like they were expecting me, clung to me like a second skin. I tried to call in on the CB, voice low. Breaker 19. Anyone out there? Static hissed in reply, faint whispers I couldn't make out. Then silence. Only the hum of my own rig and the faint vibration in the steering wheel, fading and returning like a pulse. Hours later, as dawn broke over the horizon, the desert began to bleed light into the sky. Pink and orange reflected off the cab windows, washing away some of the fear that had settled in my chest. I slowed, taking a sip of lukewarm coffee, heart still pounding, eyes flicking to every shadow along the roadside. I looked back one last time. Nothing. No footsteps. No glowing headlights. Just the empty highway stretching endlessly behind me. Quiet, still, normal. And yet I knew. I could still feel it. That presence. That gaze. That mannequin rocking closer in some silent, impossible way. I made my delivery on time, rig intact. No one asked questions, and I didn't offer any. Some things you keep to yourself. Some things you can't explain, no matter how much sense you try to make of them. Even now, months later, I can't pass a truck stop in Wyoming at night without thinking of that corner, that rocking chair, and the empty trucks idling like they were waiting for me. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still hear the soft footsteps keeping pace with my rig, echoing faintly in the cab, just behind me. I survived that night, but part of me never left that truck stop. Part of me will always remember the sensation of being followed, watched, and tested in that lonely corner of Wyoming. And every time I park at a truck stop after midnight, I glance at the corners. Always. My name is James Jim Carver. I've been a trucker for nearly 25 years, hauling everything from produce to machinery across the country. I've driven through rain, snow, and wind so strong it pushes a loaded rig off its line. I've seen deer leap into headlights, black ice snap tires, and abandoned cars along roads that feel too long to be real. But nothing prepared me for the night I ran into what I now call the highway choir. It was late November, a Tuesday night. I was driving my 2015 Volvo VNL 780 eastbound on a rural stretch of Highway 72 in Tennessee. The fog had rolled in thick enough to blur my headlights into soft halos that stretched out into the mist. CB chatter was dead. No one, not a single voice, not even static, for miles. Just the hum of the diesel, the occasional rustle of leaves along the roadside, and the vibration of tires on asphalt. I'd been on the road for hours, my eyelids heavy, but alert. The delivery schedule was tight, overnight drop in Knoxville, and I was determined to make it on time. That's when I first heard it. A soft, echoing sound, distant but unmistakable. Singing. Hymns, faint but clear, drifting across the empty fields on either side of the highway. At first, I thought it was the radio, a late-night station picking up ghostly echoes from a far-off church. I flipped the dial, nothing. Every channel dead. AM, FM, CB, all dead. The fog seemed to amplify the sound, carrying it closer with every mile. My skin prickled. There was no explanation that made sense. I slowed the truck, fog lights cutting through the mist. The singing grew clearer. Then I saw them. Figures, barely visible at first, standing along the tree line beside the road. Truckers or something dressed like truckers. Their eyes hollow, their mouths moving in unison as if in prayer. No words came out, yet the hymns filled the air. I froze for a moment, heart pounding. Rational thoughts fought to take over. Maybe a church service, maybe a choir rehearsal gone wrong, maybe someone dressed for a prank. But the fog swallowed everything beyond the trees. No lights, no cars, no congregation. Just them, unmoving, swaying in rhythm with the song. I touched the CB. Breaker 19, anyone? Static answered, but faint whispers floated through it, impossible to decipher. My knuckles turned white on the wheel. The cab smelled suddenly metallic, like ozone after a storm, and a faint scent of wet pine drifted in through the vents. Goosebumps rose under the fluorescent dash lights. I pressed the accelerator, thinking I could drive past, leave the fog and the figures behind. But they moved, or at least their presence seemed to shift closer. Not physically. My mirrors showed empty roadside, but I could feel them matching my pace, the rhythm of their hymn echoing in tandem with my tires. The fog thickened, swallowing the road ahead. Mile markers flickered past, repeating, stretching the distance impossibly. I tried to rationalize it. Tired eyes, hallucination, sensory fatigue. But the cold that ran up my arms, the vibration of the steering wheel that didn't match the asphalt, the metallic scent in the air, none of it was imagined. I looked in the mirrors again. Shadows among the trees shifted in time with my movement, their heads tilted toward the cab, mouths moving silently. The rhythm of their steps, though unseen, matched the tires. I slammed my hand on the horn. The sound bounced uselessly in the fog, swallowed by the night. Panic pressed in. My brain shouted to turn around, but my body obeyed only the wheel. I floored it, weaving slightly, trying to shake the sensation. The fog parted slightly as headlights ahead came into view. Another stretch of road, a gas station illuminated in the distance. Relief should have come, but it didn't. The singing lingered in the cab, faint now, echoing off the tires, off the mirrors, off the very frame of the truck. By the time I reached the station, the fog had begun to lift. I killed the engine, the vibration fading, but my hands remained clammy, heart still racing. I stepped out, scanning the roadside. Nothing. No figures, no shadows, no echo of footsteps. Just empty asphalt and the remnants of mist. The attendant looked at me as I came in. "Rough night?" he asked. I didn't answer. How could I explain that what I just witnessed, what my mind and body remembered, defied logic? I delivered the load on schedule, but the memory of the highway choir stayed with me. I replayed it every night. The hollow eyes, the silent mouths, the way their rhythm matched the tires, the fog swallowing the edges of reality. It's the kind of thing you can't report. People would think you've lost it, or worse, blame the fatigue. Sometimes, when I drive long stretches alone at night, I swear I hear the faint echo of hymns, just at the edge of hearing, floating across fields I know are empty. And every time I glance into the mirrors, I half expect to see those hollow eyes, mouths moving in prayer, following silently behind. I survived that night, but part of me, the part that grips the wheel and listens for the slightest sound, will never forget the rhythm of those footsteps, the echo of those silent hymns, the way the fog carried them across the Tennessee night. And even now, miles from that highway, I can feel the cadence in my tires, the memory of being followed. Some roads you drive. Some roads drive you. The highway choir drives still. My name is Rick Dalton. I've been driving a Peterbilt 389 across the Pacific Northwest for over 15 years, running freight from Portland to Boise and everywhere in between. I've seen black ice coat a mountain pass before sunrise, had deer explode into headlights, and felt storms that make the rig sway like a small boat. But nothing I've seen on the road compares to the night I picked up the hitchhiker on that foggy Oregon backroad. It was past midnight, and the fog had settled heavy, low enough to lick the asphalt. My rig's headlights barely pierced through the white haze. CB chatter was dead, static only faintly buzzing, like a mosquito trapped in the cab. I had just crossed the Willamette River and was on a stretch of road that barely made it onto most maps. Narrow, winding, bordered by thick pine and cedar. My delivery was time-sensitive. A refrigerated load of dairy needed in Bend by morning. I should have just driven on. That's when I saw him. A figure standing on the roadside, thumb out, coat pulled tight against the chill. His face was obscured by the fog, pale and indistinct. My first thought was crazy kid. My second thought was hesitation. I've been on this road alone enough to know it's not always safe. Still, something about the figure compelled me to stop. I pulled over, parking cautiously on the gravel shoulder. Need a ride? I asked. His head tilted slightly, and he nodded. No words. His presence made the cab feel colder instantly, even though the heater was on full. I opened the passenger door and he climbed in. First, he said nothing. Just sat there, eyes fixed on the windshield, hands resting lightly on his knees. I tried to make small talk, weather, traffic, the usual. Nothing. Then, minutes later, he began talking. Not about the road, not about the weather. About me. About my family. My wife, Emily. My daughter, Cassie. Things only I knew. Quiet details. My daughter's favorite bedtime story. My wife's old tattoo on her ankle. I swallowed hard. Where are you getting this from? I asked, keeping my voice steady, trying to rationalize it. Maybe a prank, maybe a coincidence. But he smiled, faint, almost too knowing. I've been waiting for you here, he said, his voice calm, unervingly precise. The words settled in the cab like a weight. The hum of the diesel, the vibration of the steering wheel, everything felt amplified. Goosebumps crawled across my arms. My eyes flicked to the mirrors. The fog pressed against the glass. Trees blurred into one another. I wanted to tell him to get out. I wanted to drive away. But my rig was a confined space and he seemed anchored. I tried talking again, rationalizing. This is a back road. I'm the only one driving tonight. There's no way you... I stopped. How could he know these things? Details from hours ago. Weeks? Even things I'd only whispered in passing? The silence that followed his smile was almost worse than words. The rest of the drive was unbearable. Every mile marker passed, but the fog thickened. The world outside seemed unreal, like it was bending around the rig. The air smelled faintly metallic, like a storm before lightning hits. The tires hummed on the wet asphalt, but the sound felt off, slightly delayed, echoing in the cab as if the world itself was out of sync. Finally, the next town appeared, a dim cluster of streetlights and a gas station. Relief. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be where he left. I parked and turned around. The passenger seat was empty. No hat, no coat, no sign he'd been there. My coffee cup from earlier sat on the console, untouched. The fog lingered, but the cab felt heavier somehow, charged with the memory of him. I ran through the lot, checked the station, asked the attendant. Nothing. No bus, no hotel, no one matching his description. The streets were empty, the town asleep. Only the faint echo of my own heartbeat in my ears. And then I looked in the rearview mirror. The shadow lingered, just at the edge of vision, blurred by fog, but unmistakable. Watching, waiting. Even as I pulled back onto the highway, the weight of that presence pressed down on the cab, as if he had attached himself to the rig, following me silently. The drive back to Portland was long. I tried ignoring it, rationalizing it. Maybe it was a reflection, a trick of the fog, fatigue. But every time I glanced in the mirrors, every mile marker that repeated just slightly off its normal place, I felt him there, listening, knowing, waiting. I delivered the load on time. Nothing appeared unusual the next day. Life went on. But the image of that fog-bound hitchhiker, the calm, knowing smile, the words he spoke, the hollow certainty of his presence, has never left me. Even now, months later, when I drive alone through Oregon's backroads at night, I check the passenger seat reflexively. And sometimes, I swear, just at the edge of the rearview mirror, a shadow lingers, a reminder that some things on the highway don't simply disappear when the cab door closes. I survived that night, but part of me never left that foggy stretch of Oregon. Part of me will always remember the quiet certainty, the way he knew, and the way he vanished, leaving only the lingering dread of being watched from a place that shouldn't exist. And every time I stop on a lonely back road, I glance in the rearview. Always. My name is Samuel Sam Ortega. I've been running a Kenworth T680 through the Rockies for over 20 years. Snow, wind, rock slides, and black ice have all been part of the job, but nothing I've experienced compares to the night my CB radio started talking to something else. It was late February, around 2 a.m., the kind of hour where the mountains feel alive with silence. I was eastbound on Highway 6, hauling a refrigerated load of produce from Denver to Salt Lake City. The temperature had dropped to near zero, and snow had begun to dust the edges of the road. CB chatter was minimal, occasional static, the faint hiss of distant trucks, the usual monotony. Then it started. A voice crackled through the static. Sharp, urgent. Breaker 19, help, accident, mile marker 112. The name Jenkins followed, though I'd never heard of him. The voice faded, replaced by another. Harrington, need aid, lost control. I paused, hand on the CB. Maybe a misdial, maybe a prank. But the voices continued, names I didn't recognize, accidents I couldn't locate in any records. They spoke as if trapped in time, calling for help that never came. The static hissed, carrying their urgency. One voice whispered, almost indistinct, turn back, before mile marker 112. I shook my head, trying to rationalize it. Maybe the fog was bending sound. Maybe the storm distorted signals. My rig shuddered slightly as I adjusted the CB channel. Nothing else. I thought about turning around, but deadlines are deadlines. I pressed on. The road seemed to stretch unnaturally, the snow muffling tires against asphalt, the headlights illuminating fog that seemed thicker than it should be. My mirrors reflected only white and the faint outlines of distant trees. The mountains loomed like silent giants. Then the rig shuddered violently. My hands gripped the wheel tighter. For a moment, I could swear. Hands gripped mine from the outside, pressing, twisting, forcing my steering slightly. Goosebumps ran up my arms. I blinked. Nothing. Just the cab. Just me. Static crackled again, louder this time. Another voice. Sam. Don't pass, turn back. 112. The name froze me in place. It was my name. Not my CB handle, not a coincidence. My gut tightened. Every rational thought screamed to obey. But experience, stubborn and human, told me to drive through. The road curved ahead. Fog swirled into thick clouds, swallowing lane markers and shoulder completely. I glanced at the mile markers. 112 should have been there, but I barely saw it, the reflective sign distorted, almost melting into the white haze. I passed it without realizing. And then everything changed. The mountains, the trees, the asphalt, they vanished behind me. The rearview mirror showed nothing but endless fog, stretching infinitely. The CB went silent. No static, no voices, only the subtle hum of the diesel. I exhaled, thinking I'd escaped, but the cab felt heavier, colder. The air smelled metallic, like ozone after lightning. A faint tang of burnt rubber lingered as if the rig itself had strained against some unseen force. I I drove on cautiously, scanning the fog for landmarks. Nothing. No roadside signs, no peaks, no rest stops, just white. My heart pounded. I replayed the CB calls in my mind. Jenkins, Harrington, my own name. All warnings, all past tragedies, all lost to the fog now. Every mile felt like a loop. Tire vibrations no longer matched the asphalt. Steering wheel pulses felt alien, almost as if the rig was alive, resisting or guiding me. I glanced at my mirrors repeatedly. Shadows flickered briefly, like other rigs driving parallel, but no headlights, no drivers, just the sensation of being followed. I tried to call on the CB again. Static returned, but layered, almost alive. Whispers overlapped. Turn back, 112. My name again, soft but insistent. I slammed the radio off, hands trembling. Minutes or hours later, the fog thinned slightly. Ahead, a faint curve appeared, the first sign of the real world. The mountains returned. Mile markers resumed their normal sequence. I had emerged from the fog, alive, shaken, but no different in mileage than if the nightmare had never existed. I parked at the next rest stop, engine idling, trying to gather composure. The CB remained silent. No static, no whispers, no names. The fog had lifted, and the Rockies loomed normal and indifferent around me. I survived that stretch. The load was delivered on time, but the memory never left. The voices of the lost, the shuddering of the rig, the hands I could feel but never see. They haunt me every time I pass mile marker 112, or any marker, really. Sometimes, in the dead hours of night, I can still hear faint whispers in the static. Names I don't know, warnings I cannot ignore. And every time, I glance at my mirrors, half expecting to see fog stretching infinitely, the road behind me gone, and someone, riding silently, just out of sight. I drive these mountains still, cautious, alert. I listen to the CB, but only just enough. And every time the static creeps in at night, I remember that night, the mile marker, the warnings, the hands on the wheel. Some roads are not just asphalt. Some roads carry voices. And some warnings come from beyond the dead, calling you to turn back before it's too late. I survived. But every time I pass mile marker 112, I remember that fog. I remember the voices. I remember feeling unseen hands gripping the wheel. Some things on the road don't forgive mistakes. Some things wait. And some things never let go. My name is Victor Kane. I've been driving a Freightliner Cascadia through the western deserts for over 18 years, hauling freight across Nevada, Utah, and Arizona. I've navigated snowstorms in the Sierras, black ice on mountain passes, and winds that can tip a rig if you aren't careful. But nothing prepared me for that night on the lonely overpass near Tonopah. It was past 1:30 a.m., the kind of hour where the world feels suspended in cold, muted silence. The desert stretched endlessly, a black canvas punctuated by distant highway lights. My load was a refrigerated shipment of produce from Reno to Las Vegas, time-sensitive, and the roads were empty. CB chatter was practically non-existent, only the faint crackle of static. My rig hummed steadily as I drove, the tires on asphalt the only sound apart from the wind sneaking through a barely sealed window. That's when I saw her. On the overpass ahead, a woman in a white dress was pacing along the edge. Her hair was dark, wet from the desert dew, and her figure looked impossibly thin under the dim glow of a distant street lamp. She didn't wave or step back. She didn't seem aware of me at first, just pacing, muttering, screaming silently in a way that twisted the stomach. I slowed instinctively, squinting through the windshield. My headlights barely reached her, but the reflection in my side mirrors was unmistakable. I swerved slightly to give her room, and that's when it happened. My tires hit nothing beneath the rig. The steering wheel wrenched in my hands as the rig lurched, a stomach-dropping tilt, then righted itself. My heart hammered. Sweat ran down my back despite the cold. The cab smelled faintly metallic, like ozone after a lightning strike. I tried rationalizing it. maybe a depression in the asphalt, a trick of the headlights, but every instinct screamed that something wasn't right. I glanced at my mirrors. She was gone. No footprints, no movement, only the faint glimmer of her dress in the side mirror, as if the fog of the desert had swallowed her whole. I exhaled slowly, trying to calm down. The rig's tires hummed normally now. The overpass was empty, the desert silent, save for the wind whistling across the railing. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling I just glimpsed something not meant to be seen. I continued on, the highway stretching out like a ribbon of black silk. The CB remained silent. The rhythmic vibration of the tires on asphalt was almost comforting, grounding me. I told myself I was tired, that the desert shadows and my imagination had combined to create something terrifying but harmless. Then I saw the tire track, not on the shoulder, not fading into dust. A single track, perfectly preserved in the asphalt, leading straight off the edge of the overpass. I stopped immediately. My hands shook on the wheel. No body, no debris, nothing. Just the track, like someone or something had walked or fallen right into the void. I walked around my rig, checking the edges. The guardrails were intact. The drop was real, as high and deadly as any overpass should be. Yet there was no evidence of a fall. Nothing. Only the track. The desert seemed to press in around me. Wind whistled through the rig's open vents, carrying the faint scent of rain on sand, though it hadn't rained in days. The asphalt beneath my feet was cold, almost wet, though the night was dry. I stepped back into the cab, my hands cold, fingers trembling. I started driving again, eyes flicking to the mirrors. Every shadow in the desert seemed elongated, unnatural. The fog seemed to press closer, moving with the rig, almost sentient. The CB buzzed faintly. I reached to check it, static only. But in the back of my mind, I could almost hear a soft whisper, "Don't look back." I obeyed. I drove faster, tires humming over blacktop, adrenaline surging. Every mile marker passed in a blur. My rig suspension vibrated unusually, the steering wheel pulsing faintly in my hands, as if the road itself were alive. My stomach churned. My breathing was loud in the cab. The desert stretched, endless and unforgiving, and yet the image of her white dress, silent scream was burned behind my eyelids. Hours later, I reached a rest stop near Beatty. I parked, still shaken, and tried to process what had happened. I walked the edges of the lot, checked the tires, inspected the rig. Nothing. All systems normal. No tracks, no shadows, only the lingering smell of ozone and metallic cold air. I never saw her again. Not on that route, not on any overpass, not anywhere. But the memory stayed. The silent scream, the impossible tire track, the sensation of falling and being saved all at once. It's with me every time I approach a desert overpass at night. I've driven through storms, black ice, and landslides. I've lost count of how many rigs I've seen roll off cliffs or into ravines. But nothing compares to the desert silence and the certainty that something unseen can reach out, leave evidence, and vanish. Some nights, when I'm parked alone at a rest stop, I glance at the mirrors. The desert is still, the wind carries faint scents, and the asphalt stretches endlessly. And every time I see a white shimmer at the edge of vision, my stomach drops. I survived that night. The rig is fine. My deliveries were made. But I carry the memory of her pacing on the edge, screaming silently, and the tire track etched in reality that defies explanation. Some things on the road aren't accidents. Some things leave their mark, waiting for the next driver to see. And some fall off the edge and vanish, leaving only the memory behind. I still drive, but I never forget the overpass in Nevada. And every time I cross a lonely bridge at night, I glance down, just in case. My name is Marcus Hale. I've been driving a Peterbilt 579 across New England and the northern states for nearly 20 years. Snow, ice, and blizzards are part of the job, but nothing ever felt like that night in northern Maine. It was late December, around 11:30 p.m., and a sudden storm had rerouted me off Route 2. Visibility dropped to less than 100 feet in minutes. Headlights barely cut through the falling snow, and the asphalt beneath my tires disappeared under a blanket of white. My CB crackled faintly, only static and distant voices. I'd expected road closures, detours, but nothing prepared me for what came next. Through the dense pines lining the highway, I saw it. A small cabin, smoke curling lazily from the chimney, warm and inviting against the cold night. My rig was heavy, the wind tugging at it, but the sight of smoke made me think of shelter, maybe a chance to get out of the storm for a few minutes. I pulled over carefully, snow crunching under the tires, and approached the cabin. I knocked. No answer. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open, expecting emptiness. Instead, the interior was unnervingly intact. Plates set for dinner, silverware neatly arranged, chairs pulled out as if someone had just left the table. The smell of bread, faint and warm, lingered in the air. I stepped inside, my boots leaving wet prints on the wooden floor. The silence pressed against me like a living thing. I called out. No reply, only the storm outside, muffled through the thick walls. My eyes scanned the room. Everything seemed normal, yet off. The table setting was perfect, unnaturally so. The plates gleamed, untouched by snow or soot. A pot simmered quietly on the stove, though no flames flickered beneath it. Goosebumps ran down my arms. Then I heard it, the unmistakable rumble of my rig's engine, starting itself, far away. My stomach dropped. I hadn't turned the key. My truck was half a mile down the snowy path I had driven to reach the cabin. Panic rose. I ran outside. The snow was blinding. My tracks from the cabin to the highway were gone. Swallowed, erased, as if the storm itself had never let me pass this way. And the cabin, it was gone. Nothing remained. Just endless pines, tall and silent, stretching into darkness. No chimney, no smoke, no warm light. The forest looked exactly as it had before I'd seen the cabin. A sound broke the silence, soft, faint laughter echoing through the trees. Not a human laugh. Hollow, otherworldly. It rolled over the snow, carried by the wind, fading and returning in uneven pulses. My heart raced. My boots sank into the snow as I stumbled back toward the highway, but the trail had disappeared completely. I started running, snow up to my knees, wind tearing at my coat. The CB remained dead. No static, no comforting chatter, just the sound of the storm. I called out for help, but only my own voice answered, muffled and weak. Every tree seemed to lean closer, shadowed forms just beyond the reach of my headlights. Finally, I emerged back onto the highway, disoriented, exhausted, and shaking. The snowstorm had lightened slightly, and the road markers were faintly visible. My rig was parked exactly where I had left it, key in ignition, engine running normally. But I could still hear the laughter echoing faintly, carried by the wind through the pines, fading and returning. I climbed into the cab, hands trembling, fingers gripping the wheel until they went numb. The heat was on, the defroster struggling against the storm, but the smell of the cabin lingered faintly in my nose. Bread, warmth, something alive. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something had been inside the rig while I was gone, unseen but watching. I drove on cautiously, snow crunching under the tires, eyes darting to the edges of the highway. Every shadow seemed to shift when I looked away. Every gust of wind sounded like the echo of laughter. The mountains and pines blurred into one endless wall of white and black. Hours later, I reached the first town with lights. Gas station open. People moving about. I stepped out of the cab, still shaking. The warmth of the streetlights was almost unbearable after the cold of the storm. I tried to tell the attendant what had happened, but the words wouldn't form properly. Cabin, snow, laughter. It disappeared. He nodded politely, assumed I was spooked by the storm. Most people never get the woods this far north at night. Most people never see the things that hide just beyond the tree line. I didn't correct him. I paid for gas and left. I've returned to that route since then, dozens of times, hauling freight through Maine's northern pines. Never again did I see the cabin. The snowstorms come and go. The nights are long and cold, and the forest stretches endlessly. But sometimes, when the wind shifts just right, I swear I can hear that faint laughter carried through the pines. And for a heartbeat, I can smell the warmth of the cabin, see the faint glow of smoke curling from a chimney that isn't there. Some nights I drive slowly, eyes scanning the forest edges, imagining the cabin sitting there, ready and waiting for the next driver, foolish or desperate enough to seek shelter in the storm. I've learned never to stop for smoke in the pines after dark. Some places aren't on maps. Some things are not meant to be seen. And some laughter is older than the road, colder than snow, and hungrier than any driver could imagine. I survived that storm. I delivered my load on time, but I carry the memory of that cabin, perfect and impossible, and the laughter echoing in the wind. Every time I drive through northern Maine, past miles of pines, I glance to the edges of the highway. And every time, I half expect to see smoke rising, chairs pulled out, and a meal waiting, as if the forest has been preparing for me all along. Some nights, the snow falls silently, but I still hear it, the laughter, faint, inviting, echoing through the pines. And I know, some things on the road do not want to be found. They wait, and they remember.